It feels like every day there's some new leadership training program or a new trend.
Right. Definitely.
But how do we know what actually works?
Yeah.
Right? You sent in this piece from Coach Dane.
Yeah.
It's called The Impact of Instructor-Led Training in Managerial Development, a deeper dive.
Mm-hmm.
And I was really curious to get your take on it, because especially building a strong team,
Yeah.
that's something that I think a lot of people are thinking about.
Yeah, this is a really relevant topic, especially now when we think about how many teams are dealing with remote work still
Yeah.
and the digital world and
Yeah.
how things have changed. So
Yeah.
it's definitely something that's top of mind, I think, for a lot of leaders.
Yeah, and it's like everything's online learning, this and micro learning that which I'm sure have their place, but this piece from Coach Dane really makes a case for why we shouldn't just dismiss those old school in-person trainings.
Yeah, it's so easy to go down that route of thinking that, oh, this is the old way of doing things.
Right.
But what Coach Dane argues is that when it comes to actually changing behavior, which is really what we're trying to get at the heart of, good management skills, that in-person training offers something you don't really get otherwise.
Yeah.
He actually tells this story about a manager who was struggling with delegation.
Okay.
And until that manager was actually put in a role-playing situation in a workshop setting, it just wasn't clicking for them.
Interesting.
Like they weren't really understanding the impact of their, maybe micromanaging. And so it was that in-person experience that actually led to that aha moment.
That's a great example because I can totally see how that would be
Right.
something that maybe gets missed in like an online module or something. You need that interaction. You need someone there to kind of like
Yes.
play it out with you.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And Coach Dane really stresses that instructor-led training is so important because it creates that structured learning environment where you're not just like bombarded with information online, but you have a curriculum. You have someone who's guiding you through the process. And that can lead to like a deeper level of understanding.
Versus just like signing your team up for some online course and they're like
Like,
clicking through and then who knows where they end up down some rabbit hole of who knows what. Totally. I've been there.
Yeah. And it can be really hard with all of the, the availability of information to actually focus in on, okay, what do I actually need to know right now to get better?
Yeah.
And, it's not even just about having that structure. It's also the real-time interaction piece, right?
Yeah.
Like you can ask questions as they come up. You get that immediate feedback.
Right.
You can learn from other people's experiences in the room.
Totally. It's like the difference between like reading a recipe and having someone there to be like, okay, now do this, now do this.
Exactly.
Sometimes you don't even know what question to ask until you're kind of like in it,
Yes. And that's where I think sometimes those aha moments come in, right? Like you're having a conversation with someone or someone in the group brings up a point and it sparks something for you.
Right.
And that feeds into, I think, what Coach Dane was talking about with the engaging sessions.
Yeah.
Think about like a training that you've had that really resonated with you. I would bet that it involved, some kind of lively debate or some kind of activity that brought those concepts to life.
Totally. I remember this one training, it was about leading through change.
Okay.
And like we did this whole simulation.
Wow.
And it got a little heated.
Oh, really?
But it was like we had to think on our feet. We had to actually like apply the concepts in like a somewhat realistic scenario.
Right.
And it was so much more impactful than just like looking at a slideshow.
100%. And I think that's what Coach Dane is getting at too. It's like that active learning. That's what sticks with us. So he talks about that, but then he takes it a step further too. And he talks about relationships, which might not seem like a direct link to developing managers,
but it makes so much sense when you think about it,
Right.
because some of the best advice I've gotten at work has come from people that I met at like a random training session.
Exactly.
You're thrown together with people from different departments, different levels. You never know what kind of connections you're going to make. And it's not even just about the advice. It's also just that like camaraderie and that support system.
Exactly. And, Coach Dane kind of touches on that, but he really focuses on how all of this translates into developing good managers.
Okay.
And one thing that he emphasizes is that when you physically show up for a training session, it adds a different level of accountability. Like you're more likely to engage, you're more likely to participate, you're more likely to really like...
It feels more official.
Yes, it feels more important. And so you're less likely to just like check your phone or,
Right.
you know,
Right. You can't just like turn off the camera and
see
be
that.
like, I'm done.
Right. You've made that commitment to be there.
Exactly.
And I think that's something that's really valuable.
Totally.
And that's where I think Coach Dane's experience as a coach really comes through in this article, because he
Yeah.
talks about the importance of having that expert trainer in the room, someone who can guide discussions,
Right.
give people feedback that's really targeted to them.
It's tailored to you and
Yes.
what you need.
And help them translate the learning into actually changing behavior.
Yeah, because it's one thing to like learn something conceptually.
Right.
It's another to be like, okay, but how do I actually do this?
Like,
how do I put this into practice in a way that's going to work for me and my team?
Yes, and that's where I think having that experienced person there to kind of guide you
Totally.
can be so helpful.
It reminds me of this one training I took, and the material was fine,
Okay.
but the trainer was amazing.
Got it.
She just had this way of pushing us beyond our comfort zones.
Interesting.
Like helping us to see things from different perspectives.
Yeah.
And that was not something I would have gotten from like a pre-recorded course or something.
Right. And that's the kind of thing that you just can't replicate
Yeah.
in a virtual environment. And so, Coach Dane's argument is that this approach, while it might seem, kind of old school,
Right.
it actually leads to a much better return on investment,
Okay.
because you end up with more competent managers,
Right.
more confident managers,
Makes sense.
which then benefits the whole team,
Hmm.
right? It's like a ripple effect.
Oh,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
it's not just about like checking a box of like, yep, we trained our managers.
Exactly.
It's about actually making a difference in your organization.
Yes.
That's really interesting stuff.
Yeah, this has been a really good conversation.
Yeah, this deep dive has really got me thinking about, how we approach this whole like, leadership training and manager development thing.
Mhm.
And I think what I'm hearing is it's not that one is necessarily better than the other.
Right.
It's more about like, how do you find the right approach for your team?
Yes. Find that sweet spot and figure out, okay, what are our objectives?
Yes.
What are we really trying to accomplish here?
And what's going to work for us?
Exactly.
Because what works for one team might not work for another.
100%.
So as you're listening, think about that.
Yes.
Think about, what does your team need to thrive?
What's going to move the needle?
Yes. What's going to actually make a difference? And how can you find the right approach?
And what can we learn from both of these approaches? And
Yep.
how can we kind of integrate them in a way
Yes, exactly.
that really works?
Love it. Well, on that note, I think we'll wrap up this deep dive.
Sounds good.
Thanks so much for listening, everyone, and we'll catch you next time.